You're live. All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our April 3rd Budget and Facilities meeting. We're rounding the corner of the budget season for this year. We have a lot to discuss. I will just preface everything with, guess what? The state hasn't approved a budget yet. So we're still dealing in a little bit of unknown territory, but I know Kathy is going to illuminate us on a little more known territory, correct?
Yes.
All right, so with that, Kathy, go right ahead.
Yeah, so I handed out kind of a summary of what I'm going to be discussing. We've been working, as everyone knows, since November on this budget, and it takes a while to get everything to where we need to be, that's for sure.
We don't have it.
Oh,
we do. Okay, that too, sorry.
Yeah. So, if you go to the third page, this
Second
talks
page.
about the second, oh, sorry, this page. Mine's a little different. So,
Third in line.
it
Oh,
is.
it's third in line. Third in line, 1, 2, 3, be counted. Okay, sorry.
So, currently, the appropriations budget is $184,265,295, which is a 5.39% increase over the prior year. This represents a 2.63% tax levy increase, which is slightly below our allowable tax levy. And if you've been following along, we've gone from a $12 million gap to the $7 million to 3.7. So we keep fine tuning the budget to get where we are. So I wanted to review with you what is actually in the budget. We had a lot of things presented to the board, and I just want to assure people of what is in the budget and what did we do to actually get to where we are today. So the next page, this talks about staffing positions. So we have some funds that were funded by the American Rescue Plan funding. Those are 3 FTE ICT programs at Sousa. There's 1 general ed teacher at Salem, 1 FTE general ed teacher at Sousa, 0.5 speech teacher, and 0.5 psychologist. So these were all things that were funded by funds from the federal, and now they're going to be in the general fund. It maintains all existing academic, extracurricular, and support programs. And it also proposes adding the following positions: 1 FTE at Manor Haven, 1 FTE at the high school for E&L, 1 FTE for a high school science teacher, 1 FTE for a high school maintainer. Also, 1 custodian at Daly. This is to address the new addition that we have for large building. It also has 3 FTEs for security guards. And we've also discussed 1 FTE of a technology administrator. And this is something that we're going to speak with the board in depth more at another time. The next page also kind of lists all the highlights that we've been discussing at the budget meetings for the past 4 budget workshops. We have an expansion of the occupational ed program. So this is at BOCES. We started with 10 students in their junior year. They're going to be moving up to their senior year. And then we'll have another 10 students that will be going into the program. Our Twilight program has been very successful, and we're expanding this as well. As we have more enrollment, it necessitates an expansion. There are funds in here for a security vehicle. We have the second year of our security server upgrade. We have a scholarship program for the entry kiosk that's also included. We have funding for a cultural arts program. Some of this was funded by grant funding, but now we want to take that into the general fund. We're going to be purchasing musical instruments. We have xylophones and 6 timpani drums. We're purchasing supplies and materials for the graphic design class. We're going to be doing like an interactive TV as well as 10 Canon Rebel cameras. We're increasing the playground equipment code. So we had the playground committee come and speak at the board meeting, and this supports that. It's adding an additional 75,000 to the 50,000 traditionally allocated. We have equipment to support the operation and maintenance of the plant. We have the transfer to capital for the daily Salem group projects. There's the type of repairs and upgrades to bathrooms and flooring in District 12. We also have new flooring for the middle school and high school fitness rooms. We have additions to Project Adventure climbing apparatus. We have new championship banners for the high school gymnasium. We have furniture for the new construction and the steam rooms. So Daly has new construction, they'll be new furniture. We also have Sousa and Salem have steam rooms that are being added. So when they're finished, we need to furnish these. And also the wiring to make them smart and have smart bulbs and everything that needs to go. Additional funds for clubs, field trips, and student classroom supplies. This was an issue that the HSAs had brought to the board last year about classroom supplies and how could we streamline those supplies and really help parents with all of the necessary supplies. Also, we speak about a lease purchase agreement to purchase the one-to-one student mobile devices. And after we're done going through this, I'll explain a little more about that process. Also, we have replacement for the hardware, for the technology infrastructure. There are certain things that need to be refreshed. So this has in it the ability for us to do that. We're also looking at Wi-Fi for outdoor running spaces and also purchasing 2 30-passenger buses to help with our transportation challenges. So the next page kind of tells you how we got to where we are, how we balanced the budget, how we went from 3.7 gap to a $500,000 gap to now the tax. So the estimated revenue for interest, miscellaneous, and use of facilities, we actually increased that compared to the prior year. Interest rates, as everybody knows, have been increasing, so we've recognized more interest. And also the miscellaneous, when we typically go out to borrow for the district, we borrow money for our TAN to continue operations. We would budget for that conservatively, so we do actually get a premium back from that. So I increased those quotes as well. And we've also spoken about facilities, looking at fee structure. So it's just really a slight increase in the facilities. We're not sure what that's going to look like. Also, the district has a reserve called E-Dollar. This is employee benefits accrued liability. And what it is, when people retire, they may be able to cash in some of their sick days. So this reserve accounts for that liability. So what I'm proposing is we use $100,000 from that because each year we budget about $150,000 for this expense. So this is a way to offset the tax levy. Instead of cutting something else, we may have more retirements this year, and it's something I think we could, not use in a problem. Also, the E&L code request, we reduced those because there was redundancy with the other codes and also some grant funding that they're using. We also are looking at a reduction of staff hired to address the COVID issues and also based on the IEP needs of our students. We reduced transportation costs also because with the purchase of 2 new buses and 2 drivers, we're able to save quite a bit on our special ed rooms as well as parentally placed students. We also were able to reduce contractual codes for the facilities, hiring a maintainer at the high school. They'll work on smaller things, smaller electrical things, and just, we might have hired contractual people to come in and fix things, but having a maintainer ensures that the facilities are being kept up a lot more frequently, not that they're not now, but it'll just help with a lot. We also reduced the overtime code for the custodial with hiring another custodian for the daily building, we won't need as much overtime. And also, we've been able to really staff our custodian. It was very difficult to find custodians, but Brian's been pretty successful in finding people, so we think we can reduce the overtime code. Also, computer-assisted instructional codes. Jessica went through with Brian with a fine-tooth comb. We had, in the past, you had principals budgeting for certain software, and Ryan was also budgeting for it, looking at it. So this is a way to actually make sure we're streamlining everything, and we were able to have some reductions there as well. We also reduced some of the security requests in the contractual code. We think it's best to develop a long-term plan and fees in these requests. So there were requests for over close to $400,000, but we did it for like $100,000 request. We were able to do kiosks and buy some walkie-talkies. They had wanted to replace all of the walkie-talkies and go to a whole new system. But I think that if we look at our repeater and the current system we have, making that stronger, we can gradually phase things in. So that is really the overview for the budget. Would you like me to discuss the lease?
Before we do that, let's address any questions that were here from this presentation. Based on your hand raised, I'm sure it's really are.
So, I do. You want me to start? So you said about the E&O codes that were reduced. There was no programming reduced, right?
Right, there was no program, so it's really.
So it was just, it was, right, the requests that were, you said that there were redundancy with other codes. So did the E&L requests did they receive their requests? Or is it through grants and?
Right, so what they were requesting, there was some funding in there for a software program, but it's already been through Ryan.
Got it. So there was a double,
Yes.
so it's based, that's what I just wanted to
Yes,
clarify.
and she also had, like certain salary codes in there,
Got it.
what we budget for
So you're
those
just-
under the salary
okay.
code, so.
Okay, so it looks like a lot of, I don't want to say the word double dipping, but it kind of seems like they were in two separate columns and we were able to put that all in one.
So I think in the past, the budget process was a lot more fragmented.
Mhm.
People were putting things in their budget because they wanted to make sure it was covered. But now that we're looking at it together and we're all discussing things, we can see the redundancy, so we're trying to look at it a lot closer.
Before you go on your second, I just have a follow-up to that, because we've seen that both last year and this year. You were showing us how there were this reduction of codes and trying to streamline where we stand. We've seen it again this year. Where do you stand as far as this streamlining? Like, are we completely streamlined? Have we eliminated all the redundancies, most of them?
I'm hoping we have, but I think with everything, there's always room for improvement, and that's why we keep having discussions with the budget builders so we can understand their needs. And also, if everybody understands the big picture, we can look at things like that. I think with the software, that is a big place that you'll find redundancies because there isn't one person looking over all of the software. So one of the things we want to get to is somebody looking at the usage of the software, recommending software to teachers or just for instructional purposes. But then if something isn't being used properly or a lot, maybe doing away with that because there's another software that kind of could take the place of that. So I think that's really important.
Yes.
And there's also certain economies of scale. You can have a subscription for the entire district, where we had, I think, like 5 elementary schools with their own subscription, but we were able to get a district-wide subscription and save significant money.
That's great. Just on that same redundancy of codes, great to hear.
No,
Okay, no, that's it. I don't have any more. I just want to make sure that we can go on to the
Can I
next
just
question.
finish what I was
Yes.
asking? So if we go back to the draft budget, you said that there's transfer to capital for daily sailing, for repairs, upgrades to bathrooms and flooring district-wide. Then you talk about new flooring for the middle school and high school fitness rooms. Is that part of transfer to capital?
No.
So would that be transfer to capital? Like, I'm curious how that doesn't, we could have put that into the transfer to capital. I'm just curious, like,
It's like
where,
wrestling matting, so I think that's more of an equipment purchase and not a installation or construction project.
so it's not actual flooring, it's just.
It's a floor matting.
It's like a cushion, yeah.
It's a wrestling mat that they put over, it's cut to the floor so that they can use that space for wrestling.
But it
Come
doesn't
up,
qualify.
it comes out easily.
Yes, it comes out after the wrestling season.
Right, so it doesn't qualify to go into transfer to capital, okay, because of the nature of the project. Okay. I think that was the only question I had. Okay, I'm good.
I'm curious about this EPALR reserve, how much money is in there?
I think it's about 3.7 million.
It's a reserve that we basically almost never talk about.
Well, we
I mean, I'm
actually
sure you
do.
talk about it.
We actually do adjust the budget. Last year we adjusted it, I think, twice to actually use money out of there because when we have teachers retire or staff retire, that we're making payout to them, we adjust it and take money from the reserve.
That's great. So, I think you were pretty clear on this, but just to clarify, the money we're taking out is because that's the amount of money that we think is going to cover, the payouts to people who are retiring
It's
this
actually
year.
less. We have 150,000 budgeted for that. So I'm just proposing using 100,000 because I didn't want to take a lot. So, not that that's a lot compared to
And
the
then I'm
size.
assuming that's just a judgment call, it's like how much do we use to cover it? Okay. Under security, I know we don't want to talk security in detail here, but I'm assuming like whatever we have decided to phase it into the adult ones, like is our security committee and also, Dr. Hines, our security guards, we feel like that's safe and fine from a security standpoint.
I'm sure the committee has to be, it has to be discussed with them as well. But I just think doing it all at once, especially in this budget, I think would be difficult.
And like the fact also that we've got two separate security audits. I don't
So we
think
may be
should-
making
Right.
bigger changes, but I mean, what we have now is safe and fine.
We're adding-
and we're
While we
increasing-
hold tight and wait for the rest of the information and decide what an overall change should look like.
So the changes I think that we're taking away, Rachel, is that they're not doing a full new walkie-talkies, but there are
There's
three
equipment.
security guards. I
There's
just want everybody to be sure that we.
Yeah, we're not reducing security
It's
guards,
equipment.
it's an equipment change.
Right, I just want to make that kind of
Yeah.
more of a discussion, a highlight, let's not forget that.
I think I'm okay right now. I
I
have
do have
some
one more
quick
question, I'm
questions.
sorry. Do you have another question?
Why isn't, go ahead,
Sorry. So I just want to ask a question.
Let's do, wait, before you ask that question, could we talk about page 2 of, we missed page 2? So maybe we could just talk about page 2, sorry, because it also talks about the allowable tax levy limit and our budget to budget increase, things of that nature. So why, yeah.
So you have that the allowable is 2.64 and we're at 2.63 the tax levy. That's because we're slightly under. We're like 14,000 under the tax levy limit.
When did it become 2.64? Because it was 2.37, I thought, or
Yes,
something like that.
because the lease, putting in the lease, we would be leasing like 3.724, I think it is. So that increased slightly than the last time, because I've been working with Mr. Maloney, with Chris John, and Jessica, and Dr. Feeney as well, for the last couple of months. So we finally finalized the number of devices, and that's the reason.
Okay, that was my biggest confusion.
Yes,
because- So that actually, I guess, I'll wait, because that brings
We're
me
gonna
to
do
the
tennis court.
question.
Right.
That
But it looks like
changes,
there's more.
Right,
Yes.
right, so I'll wait.
So probably on that too.
And so this does not include the tennis courts.
Right. Those are your questions?
Yes,
Okay, that's right. So most of my questions were asked. I'm just curious, Dr. Shields, can you remind me the number of retirements we had this year?
It's 7.
7. Great. Thank you. And then,
On the teacher one, that is.
on the teacher line, okay. And on the administrator one? Is that what
We don't
you're,
have any
or
on the administrative
to the
one. I just
clerical.
wanted you to realize we do have other types of retirements, like
clerical,
professionals,
okay.
custodians. But I'm
We
assuming
only
your
have-
question.
My question was,
around
yes,
teachers,
yes,
right?
yes, it was, yes,
Because
thank
that's
you.
where we have the early incentive.
Yes, okay, great, wonderful. All right, and then so this the use of facilities that we talked about the last time, for looking at the revenue, you mentioned this, that we are going to increase, we're just still looking at what the increase would be. So I guess we'll still discuss that in another board meeting, because that doesn't affect the budget at this point, it's only revenue that we're looking at to make a recommendation to the board. Okay.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Just under the accounts for positions funded by ARP, it's three FTEs total, right? And these are 100.
No,
Or
it's
it
3
is
plus
three.
those, so
3,
5,
4,
6.
5,
Oh,
6.
Okay. I was assuming this was, so will these general ed teachers were actually funded out of the ARP as well?
Yes. Well, they were actually,
Right.
just help me with this, because we have CRISA funds that are coming up a lot. And these were funded by CRISA. Yeah.
That's what I said the
I
last
forget
time.
which grant they were in, but you drop them off of one and then, oh yeah, no.
No, they are funded from ARP.
Yeah, it went from Chris, I think, to ARPA and then, or something like that.
The CRISA money is
It's dropping
dropping off, so the ones that were funded by CRISA, next year will be funded by the ARP.
But these
Yes,
particular.
yes,
Right,
yes.
so they were CRISA, this makes more
These were-
sense, this is
yes.
why I'm confused. So these were CRISA last year.
They were ARP.
Yeah.
They were, wait,
They were
now they moved, then they moved to CRISA?
No.
No,
They were
they were never CRISA. I
Okay.
said that wrong. the
Okay.
first time.
They were
This is
ARP, but I don't.
But are
think
these
they general
AIS?
ed- Weren't they AIS teachers? Yeah.
Right,
No,
I just don't remember
Those are the ones
funding.
that are currently being funded by CRISA.
Next year,
they'll all-
Oh, okay,
So
separately.
they ARS, and these are like 4.
No, so we funded, I think Rachel and I are both confused, and we're on the same.
And I
page.
understand why it's confusing.
We funded out of the ARP funds last year, a general ed teacher at Salem and at Sousa.
Yeah,
Yes.
the one at Sousa was part of that ICT program.
Okay.
So you have 3 special
The-
ed teachers plus 1 general for the ICT. Then we had another teacher that was due to class size.
That we added.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Kindergarten,
Yes.
so we added this position and we were able to add it by using the ARP.
Yes.
fund.
And
So
then
the
the
Salem is the
It
kindergarten.
was the added position.
doesn't mean it's still a kindergarten, it's a Salem teacher, it's a
Right, right, right.
position, yes, yes.
It's
It's pretty very,
Last year, so that I remember what we're talking about.
Yes, yes, yes.
I needed that too, thank
The
you.
Yes.
0.5 speech and 0.5 psychologists, those are also.
Those are
for
ICT also, right.
Okay,
So now you also have NIS teachers that are currently being funded by CRISA.
Got it.
But CRISA ends this
So
year.
we're gonna move them into ARP.
Yes.
Got that.
Yes, so that's why I'm.
How much ARP money do we have left? Where are we on the ARP funds?
You think that should.
That would be probably very helpful for us to look at. It actually would be nice if we just have like a snapshot of where we started with ARP, what's been used, and then where we are outstanding and how we plan to forecast. That doesn't have to be for the next meeting, well, it could be, but we'll be past budget season. But I think it would be helpful for us to see that.
Jess and I could speak with Dr. Kuhn.
Okay, that's great.
I mean, there's not that much left, right?
I
So,
mean,
900,000.
CRISA not, but the ARPA funds is great.
really,
Nine-
I feel like
we
that's
have
like
all
the
these,
breath that never goes away.
We have all of these positions.
Right.
Right. Okay. I actually feel like my questions are gonna be more circled or centered around when we have the tennis court conversation and this lease back program. So I think just for continuity's sake, why don't we dive into that
Okay,
Can I ask one quick additional question? The Wi-Fi for outdoor learning spaces, where, in general, like in all the schools?
so, over the summer, we had, this was one of our administrative goals, was to look at Wi-Fi at each building, so at all 7 buildings. Ryan Mahoney worked with the principals and the administrative teams at the buildings to come up with locations.
So it's so
It's like
teachers
one
can
spot, it's not everywhere,
access
yes.
outside
So
of
say at
whatever
Coogan
minutes
High,
they
there's a
access.
spot where the kids and the teacher could get together. We would work to have Wi-Fi in that space, so it's not the entire grounds of each building, it's like one space.
It's literally to make them more working at their classrooms.
Yeah.
Got it.
So now I'm confused, because I thought our focus was high school and middle school on that, and that's why it also arose, especially because of COVID, with more students being outside and especially congregating and whatnot, but we are extending it to all
It's
7.
it's everyone, yeah. During the administrative retreat, it was, the principals really wanted that dedicated space for a class certificate as possible. So, Ryan researched it and we,
Do we know the price, the code, how much it costs for all of the Wi-Fi in all 7
We
schools?
budgeted like 25,000.
Okay.
Good question. Okay, great.
So, just to quickly talk about the lease purchase agreement. So the state has section 17.7, it's a regulation of the Commissioner of Education. The districts are actually permitted to do a lease purchase agreement for instructional equipment, actually. So what we've done is, we worked with Dr. Keeney, Mr. Maloney, Chris Johnner, and Jessica and I worked with them over the last couple of months. We have the
Excusing
students.
you for 5 seconds, I want to make sure we're on the same page. A lease purchase agreement between the school district and the state, not between the students and the school district. Can you clarify what you mean by a lease
It's
purchase?
actually, it's not through the state. The
Okay.
state allows us to do that. So typically, school districts would have to go out to the voters if it was a lease that was extended over different budget cycles. But because it's instructional equipment, we're actually permitted by this regulation to actually do this. So the lease would be with us and another financial institution. So the district has an advisor, they're a fiscal advisor called Capital Markets Advisors. They're actually the ones who help us borrow money to actually run our budget through the TANs. And if we go out for a bond, Capital Markets assists us with that bidding process. So I reached out to Capital Markets and they can actually do the leasing for us. They'll put out a bid and have quotes. So that's one aspect of it. We're looking at a 3-year lease. And what this does is it gives us the ability to purchase $3.7 million worth of instructional equipment and pay for it over 3 years. So our budget would be like 1.291 for the actual debt service each year if you're using like a 3% interest rate, which is what capital market is advising us. So the district, due to the state testing, we think it's more beneficial for our students to have touchscreen Chromebooks. So this would be the purchase of that. It's about 4,800 Chromebooks. There's also iPads and iPad, like extra iPads. There's also teacher and paraprofessional devices as well. These are ones that are used for the instruction of the students specifically. It's not like, you can't purchase administrative computers. So in total, the IT department actually went out and received 9 different RFPs for the pricing of these devices. So it was a long process that they went through, and the total came to the 3.720 million. So, not sure about
Financially, tell us our long, other than the planning, right? Being able to then have 1.2 million, I think you said, per, over the course of 3 years. Are we interest-free, I'm assuming?
no, it's actually 3%.
3% interest. So if we were to lay out all of the funds to pay this without going through this, it would be 3.7 million? Are we getting any
Yes.
benefit from this at all?
The benefit we're getting is spreading it out over 3 years and purchasing everything in 1 year. So if we go out and receive bids on this leasing, we can actually enter into the agreement this year, but schedule the payments to start next year. And then over the summer, we would receive the devices and be able to allocate the devices. With the current devices, they do still have a value. So we didn't want to wait until they were completely not usable because we can actually sell these to a third party.
I was just gonna ask,
With
so we're
them
making,
back,
we get them
yes.
back, we do sell the devices.
Right, and so the logic behind this, this program would be every 3 years we go through this again, so that we're not waiting for them to be obsolete. We're actually still getting market value, not market value, but
Get some.
you'll get something, and then that can be folded into the lease also.
And do we have any idea of the value that we would have for the sell back?
Brian did have some kind of figure, but I don't.
So, then isn't there also a value to doing the lease because of the way you're able to do the budgeting, right? Isn't that?
Yes, so that's why it affects the tax cap, because we can actually, it's a debt service, so that's one of the exclusions from the tax cap.
Right.
Is the debt service, and the district currently has debt service coming off because of the one bond retiring. We were able to have a very competitive rate when we went to borrow for this current bond, so it decreased the amount of debt that the district had. So this is really replacing that debt.
So,
So it's like an opportune time to do this because,
because it really isn't, even though from a budgeting standpoint, it could be excluded from the tax cap, it also is in fact not having an impact on the tax levy, on the.
not as significant, it does impact it, but
But it's balanced by what's coming off.
yes.
So on people's actual taxes, they're not gonna feel it this year.
And then theoretically, every few years, if we have this, it'll fall off and go back on. It's just a cycle.
Exactly, it's kind of a way of smoothing things out, because what was happening, you would have curves where, okay, we need to replace all of these, or during COVID, you actually purchased a lot of these, devices, and now they're starting to wear and starting to not be, I believe Microsoft is replacing some of the, like the Intel of them, so you're going to need to do that, and with the testing, having touch screen Chromebooks is more beneficial to the students, because I think it allows them to complete the testing easier than writing against them with touch.
Can you give us the total number of devices, I think it was 400.
For the students, it's 4,884, but in total, it's 7,000, like slightly over 7,000 devices.
So that's replacing every device, like,
Yes.
so, why the iPads too?
Because
They also
they,
become
some of them,
obsolete.
yeah,
There's the lower grade.
yes.
Like Ingram.
Right, so, but it, like I'm asking partly because it's different technology for the Chromebooks, right? We want to get all the touchscreens at once, but but
Yeah.
iPads are iPads, right?
They also
Right.
technology wise, they're a little.
And there's also some
Not the same,
laptops
it's
and
not
desktop.
the,
I think they're switching the type of device, right? And some of those lower levels aren't they going from,
They have
They're just on
iPads.
iPads.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the best way to answer that question is because it segues into, which I know some parents are thinking, are they gonna have to bring them home back and forth? So it's a whole other conversation. I do have some movement with that, and I'll share that with the board on that. But as far as the iPads, I mean, what Ryan was saying is that they are becoming non-functional just because of the use, whether it's at home or it's in school. And plus he needs backups too. He wants to make sure he has enough when iPads go down, he can replace them.
That would be good to hold it doesn't.
It becomes very slow.
Somehow out.
And the batteries are.
Yeah. The batteries are not.
And the charging wise too.
So then,
I guess what's the breakdown? I mean, we have like about 500 students per grade.
Right, so this
So is it like 1,000 of these are iPads?
No, he has
I guess
about
it's,
600 iPads.
okay.
And then he has all of this by grade, by teacher, by parents, theirs, and then laptops and desktops.
Can I just ask that tomorrow's
Yeah, that's
evening, that the board have this breakout? Because I think this is going to be a point of discussion, and I think it'll be easier for them to see and have an understanding, if that's okay. If everyone agrees.
I mean, I'm sure there'll be more questions tomorrow, like, I'm
Yes.
asking because I'm just trying to understand if like we're upgrading everything at the same time for efficiency, sort of we're on a cycle, or like, you know, what percentage of the stuff, it sounds like the Chromebooks, we really do need to change all at once, if we're changing the technology. I'm wondering if all the iPads are there too, because they also have a longer shelf life than a Chromebook normally.
So I'm sure Mr. Maloney could speak to that better than
We
myself.
So we should have him,
Yes.
we need to have him
So
comment.
I think the question also, I think what was being said is that you want to be able to upgrade them, from what I understand, before they're actually done with their shelf life, because that's then when you get money for them, right? So
But-
if you get
But
money.
I think
If they
again,
have a longer.
I think this is the question for Ryan for
Yeah.
tomorrow that we would like him to address. Why a replacement of everything at this time? Is it so we could get a safe
It's
cycle,
also,
or?
like, remember, all our devices are not used the same way. So iPads and Chromebooks have a different shelf life, and they're not also, like, a kindergarten and a first grader are not using their iPads, I think,
Well,
the way a middle school or a high school student is using their device all the time, every day, dropping them probably more often because they're transporting them, you know.
well, but I think maybe here's the second aspect of that question. The first aspect is, are we just doing this point, right? So this is an every 3-year cycle. Does the second 3-year iteration include as many iPads? Right, again, maybe we're putting us all, to your point, on the same playing field with totally new devices. So this is the question, Mike, if you're gonna ask Ryan to attend. That next question is forecast out for us that second 3-year iteration as well.
I mean, the way this works is you do everything.
Oh, you have, per this lease back
Well, no,
agreement.
you don't have to, I'm just saying, like, in my former district, we did this.
That's how I
And it
understood
was every 3 years you get all new devices, because if you do wait piecemeal, then you're gonna have some going off and some not, and you're not gonna have the funding, and they're not gonna be worth anything to sell back, so.
I mean,
I
I
get
think
that.
you and Brian
State-of-the-art technology.
made very clear that it made sense to do it as a whole. My question really is about the demarcation between the iPad and the Chromebook, which are different devices with different lifespans. And I'm just trying to understand, like, what is budgeting efficiency, right? Does this make sense from a budgeting efficiency standpoint, because it's still advantageous for us to do it this way? Or, you know, I think that, I'm asking questions mostly because I think there are people who would look at this and think, are we crossing the line into like luxury purchase, right? Like, everybody would love to have a new iPad every 3 years, but do you need a new iPad every 3 years? And the answer is like, we do need to do this, here's why, like, that's what.
Well, I think
that's
some
what
of it
I-
also may come down to, if you're managing 7,000 pieces of equipment and 600 of them have start dates that vary, they may fall through the cracks much easier, right? It's a personnel issue to some degree, but that again is part of that
Got it. I
conversation,
mean,
right?
once you've created an educational environment where the kids need a device to do their educational tasks, right? They have to be available, right? You absolutely can't have it be that a middle schooler can't have a Chromebook when they need a Chromebook, right? You can't have it be that NWA Day comes and somebody doesn't have an iPad or a Chromebook to do the testing on. And so I understand that. There's some of this that's just, you can't be down to the numbers on it because these things do break. And you need to be able to supply a child with a replacement. It's like, at this point, when the education is designed this way, it's like a child having a pencil. Right? They
Right,
have
of
to have a pencil every single day.
100%.
I'm just trying to understand if like, they need to be on the same cycle.
Can it be a
Or if they
Ticonderoga
could be
or
on-
does it have to be the mechanical pencil?
But I
Really,
think
that's where you are,
Okay.
yes.
Here's the real
Really,
question.
do we need to replace the
On a road,
I
like-
can't afford the
But
same
the
dress.
real question for us as a board of education, right, our position is, does it change financially if we make it a gradual replacement or all at once? Is there an
It's really
advantage?
not, it's really not what I'm asking, because I think they've already made clear that
But
the
that-
all at once makes sense.
I
just
wanna know
wanna
if
understand.
financially it makes a
Right, I'm in
difference.
financial, like, I'm asking if like the iPads really need to be on the same cycle. And I think the answer is yes, and then I just want to understand why.
So, oh, go ahead.
But the question I'm asking is, does it make a financial difference? Because I don't want, if Brian is hearing that we're saying, well, maybe we could do it piecemeal, the question that I'd like to know is, does it make a financial difference? If we take the iPads off this lease and put it into a lease next year, hypothetically, does it change for us? Is it less advantageous?
It's less advantageous.
That's what I would
because
like to make
the
sure we
more money
understand.
you're borrowing, the lower your interest rate. So if I do leases all over the place, it
That's what I'm trying to, also, as a board of education, we manage the budget. So as whether or not they're going that way.
If it was, I don't know.
I think this is,
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
presenting this because I
Perfect.
believe this is the best way to go.
Perfect,
And also to talk about content. I don't see it as a luxury, I see it as if every 3 years, you know how fast technology changes. By having the most current iPad, we can use software that is out there. There's certain ones that become outdated. So if you're not on top of it, and it's our students, we want to make sure that they have what they need to be successful.
I mean, totally, and I think you may have just answered my question, which is if you did the iPads in a separate chunk and did them, kept them for more years, even though the iPad has a longer life, financially, it still maybe makes sense to do it this way. And I'm guessing how it probably worth more to sell that. The borrowing terms are better to do it all at once. I mean, I think that sounds like
So
that's the
that's why I'm trying to
answer.
say we need to keep it into a financial type of discussion as opposed to a.
I mean, I think my question was financial to begin with.
I think, but I think we're at a better place, but I think the term, what we hit on in regards to this also will be helpful to stress tomorrow as well, right? To make sure, which is why we have these discussions, to kind of hash out some of the points that need to be, focused on moving forward when we have these discussions. Okay. So I'm looking at the time, 9:45, so we want to go to the tennis courts to bring that in, and then we can go to questions. Okay.
Can we, as board members,
I was gonna have them do that at the end, tennis courts, and
no,
then,
not necessarily.
I was gonna have them go into the tennis courts, but I guess if you have a question, yes. In
Um,
regards to the lease back, is that what you want to ask, Barney?
There's a number, but, so Dr. Hines, did I miss? I know we were considering a conversation around the one-to-one initiative for K-2.
Yeah.
Did this conversation, am I reading between the lines that we are still supporting a one-to-one for K-2?
Yeah, we're still supporting the technology. I think the question has to do with should students have to bring the equipment home, going back and forth. And that's a separate conversation. I'm going to update the board tomorrow about that. I think the concern was K through 1, K through 2. I have something I'd like to recommend to the board
Right.
about that.
But that's
But that's not, this is not a
That's
budget,
not
this is not
budget, that's
budget.
more an update. But really, I think in essence to what you're speaking about, the one-to-one initiative.
It was a budget question, but
Yeah.
thank you.
So I'm just focused on right now, that conversation with bringing back and forth. That's really the concern I've heard from parents and from board members too. But we're not removing that technology from K through 2.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I think I commented at a general meeting that this technology piece is mushrooming fiscally very, very quickly. And my concern, the state tests aside, and what I feel about them, if the state ed is mandating that every district test on computers, which is my understanding, it's the district's recommendation that we go to the touch screen. In other words, state ed is not mandating the touch screen. This is something that's coming from internally,
It's ease of use.
easier to use. Do we, before we spend all this money, do we know, right, I guess the horse is already out of the barn. There's no opportunity to push back against state ed with this mandate? To say we think it's not educationally sound to test using computers, we want to stick with paper and pencil, do we not have that option? And not only to avoid this expense,
Yeah.
but
You mean philosophically?
pedagogically speaking, so can we, is there a way to start with that before we spend all the money?
So,
Rather than spending all the money and then finding out that, well, this just was a complete colossal failure. Because I'm sure there are districts that don't have the technology to support this and the Wi-Fi and all that in the first place in other parts of the state. So I'm just,
yeah, and that might be true. I would say, I don't think it would be a good idea. Listen, I love pushing back against the state, and I think you know that, especially philosophically. I think in this instance, Dr. Feeney and I are on the same page that if we have to move in this direction, let's make sure that our students have the tools that are necessary to be successful. And by doing so, by purchasing the technology, whether we agree or disagree that 3-8 testing should be computerized or at all, the fact of the matter is that we have other districts that have moved in this direction. I have to say that's the reason why we should, but we want to do what's best for our kids, because it's not going to change. I really personally think it's not going to change. And by the way, technology-wise, whether we agree or disagree, that one-on-one, having every student having a one-on-one device is in their best interest. I think that conversation has to continue, but we need to do this. Like, I personally believe what we're going about, what Kathy's proposing, what Dr. Feeney has spoken about, and I've spoken about this ad nauseam, is that let's make sure our kids have what they need in order to be successful. Let's have a plan in place where every 3 years, we have a refresh where we don't have to make sure that, it's an articular file for some over here, some over there, and we're doing it all at once. And we're doing it in a way that I think financially benefits the district, because it allows us to use it as an solution so we can budget properly. So that's what I would recommend. And I understand where you're coming from. I really do.
so we're basically looking at another unfunded mandate from the state.
Yeah, that's probably no surprise to anybody. But if we are going to encounter another unfunded mandate, let's make sure we put our kids in the best position possible.
I understand, okay. On the ENL, the items that are being funded currently with grant money, will that grant money ever fall off? Is this, in other words, if we're eliminating those things from the budget because they're covered by grant money, are we sure that in the future, those programs, whatever they are, initiatives, will still be able to be funded somehow by grant money? I mean, I know there's no way to really have a crystal ball, but are they in danger of ending?
It's entitled to the grant,
Yes.
which is specifically for ENL students. Given the demographics of our school district and the increase that we've seen in the number of ENL students, I think it's safe to say for the near future, we're going to have that funding.
Okay.
What they do years from now.
And just to expand upon that too, so, Priscilla's office has Title III funds that she uses. Dr. Allen's office has 611, 619 grants that are federal funds. For the most part, they really haven't decreased over the years. There may be minor fluctuations, but for the most part, it's fully intact.
Those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you. All right, tennis courts.
Tennis courts. So at the board meeting, this came up, while I think it's been on our radar, we were able to answer the questions adequately, definitely was more generalized answers, so we wanted to provide a little bit more detail. These are our 5 courts, these are existing courts. And we're just gonna cover these 4 things: the current conditions of the courts, the types of cracks, repair options, and a replacement timeline. These are some pictures of the courts. These were just taken on Friday, so you see those cracks. So a repair was done in August, and that's why you see that discoloration there. Those are repairs. The crack was excavated, caulked, and then patched. And these ones, while a little bit longer and bigger, they're not deeper, there's no, tripping hazards, they are just cracks in the surface.
Brian, were all those cracks that you're showing us were all repaired in August?
Yes,
Staying,
yes,
okay.
all the cracks were previously repaired.
And annually, are you repairing these or, okay?
We're gonna get to that. Types of cracks, all tennis courts will eventually suffer cracks. Tennis court cracks are often referred to as zombie cracks because despite all that, they keep coming back. And then these are the three types of cracks, and this came from Tennis Industry Magazine. We just borrowed some of their verbiage, but it was surface cracks, which is mostly what we have, structural cracks, and then heaving. Surface cracks are minor, they're typically repaired with a crack fill or a membrane, and that's similar to like a drywall repair or a mesh fabric that goes over it, and then that crack material goes over that, and it still is a temporary patch. Again, those zombies will come back, but it provides you a little bit better of a repair. Structural cracks are serious cracks impacting the underlayment, can be temporarily repaired, but they often need an overlay or replacement. Overlay is not something that Mr. Schwartweiser is interested in, but that is some districts have gone towards turf or an overlay material or replacement. And then heaving is when you have those raised cracks, you have a tripping hazard, and obviously we don't have that, but should that have been an issue, then our insurance company surely and Mr. Schwartweiser would have recommended that quote not be used. We don't want to create a safety hazard. So going back to those repairs, last year we had the maintenance department do those repairs. Again, it was a regular crack repair. This was some budgetary information that I procured from one of our vendors. Their crack repair with a flexible sealant, they budgeted approximately $10,500 to $13,000 for all those repairs. Or using that Armor Flex right-way system, it is a budget of $30,000 to $35,000. And then the last one would be to resurface just the top layer of the courts, and that was $45,000 to $50,000. But that would address all the courts and allow us to prolong the current courts before we do a full replacement. This is the replacement proposal that we have. It's to reconstruct the 5 existing courts in kind. We have looked at options at adding courts. Mr. Schwartweiser had said that 7 would be better, and/or lighting, which would allow the teams to play longer into the evening. But after looking into that, we had the area surveyed. It is tiered, and adding the 2 courts, they have to be in a separate location. That would add supervision and some other issues. So Mr. Schwartweiser said we would prioritize lighting the 5 courts over adding the 2 additional courts. But that is still something we priced out, and something that may come back if we ever were to look into an IMA with the town. We could make truly varsity courts and public courts down in that Montfort Lock. There's 2 areas that would be applicable for more courts. But it became prohibitively expensive because then you needed some retaining walls and some of the drainage, which we're going to talk about further on. This also includes replacement of the asphalt walkway along the west side of the courts to install dry wells and address washout in the Montfort Lock stairs. And then the add alternate was to install LED lighting on the 5 courts, came in at approximately $354,000. So this is that walkway that we're talking about. This walkway walks along the west side of the courts, and then those stairs go down to Montfort Lock. And here's some pictures. You'll see in that first picture, some natural swale has occurred there. 5 courts, a lot of asphalt, impermeable, so all that water has to go somewhere. And again, that area is tiered. You'll see on both sides of these stairs, there's pretty significant washout. So all of that water is washing down these stairs and creating some safety hazards. Maintenance personnel's on it, they're aware of it, they check on it regularly and make repairs. But when we do these tennis courts, that's something we have to address. Going back to this slide, in that blue area, we would install drainage wells that would collect that water and divert it naturally as opposed to letting it wash out down those stairs. So a replacement timeline, this is a best case scenario, so this goes back to more of those general answers that we're able to give, and after vetting some of this out. A finalized design, I put 4 weeks on there because while we do have the preliminary design of the courts and we have committed to the 5 courts in kind, Mr. Schwartweiser has requested to meet the architect regarding some team seating. He'd like to put benches, he'd like to reorient some of the viewing seating, which we're going to do it. Now is the time to do it. So we're going to schedule that. We're trying to squeeze it in before we break on Wednesday, but that will then cause the architect to go back and make some changes. We're looking at about 4 weeks to finalize that design. Best case scenario right now is a 20-week approval with SED. Because the project does include that drainage, if we wanted to classify it just as a maintenance, just as resurfacing, we could probably avoid that SDP approval. Once we include that drainage, this is a true capital construction project that really should go to SED. That also allows us to get aid on the project. We will have to tie it in with an interior project, but that can be relatively small. It could be a basement, one room, or some faucet stations, or some hydration stations. Anything that we do inside the work, inside the building, will attach to the exterior project and allow us to get aid. Lead time on materials, about 8 to 12 weeks. That might grow a little if we were to include the lighting. Again, at the board meeting, the consensus was that we were not going to include the lighting. We would do the conduits and the piping at this time, and then do the lighting at a later phase. And construction, we're estimating about 5 weeks. It's a little conservative, probably do a little quicker, but we want to put in a little buffer in case of weather. We would typically try to start this right at the end of the spring season, so that we can get it done in July and have it ready for August and the athletes to return. And then this is an approximate timeline. We would finalize the design again in the month of April, submit it for SED approval. If this was in the budget, we could issue a PO. If we did not want to, though, we could issue a letter of intent. A letter of intent would allow us to move forward, pending the budget approval of next year. We can procure the materials and the orders, construct the courts in June through July of 2024, and then open the courts in 2024. And what we wanted to really illustrate is that whether the tennis courts are in this year's budget or next year's budget, the timeline would still be the same.
And pricing, if we did the letter of intent, would remain the same, or we would have a potential increase in pricing?
There could be some escalation. I feel pretty confident with a project of that size and SED, we would be able to hold that price.
Okay.
This man was got some juice.
So you're saying, Brian, that whether, am I sense, are you done?
Yes, ma'am.
So is the recommendation that we do not include it this year? And I guess the real question I have is, the conversation we had at the board meeting last week, 2 weeks ago when we met, was we did this calculation of the $900,000. We thought it would bring us at 2.97, which would keep us under the tax, under the 3. But we did the calculation with the assumption that our tax cap number was 2.37, 34, I don't remember the exact. What happens now with our 2.6 if we added 900,000?
So we would be at 3.23%.
And it also sounds like maybe there's a recommendation here.
Yes, well, that's, we would recommend waiting until the following budget, because the timeline, we wouldn't be able to really start construction on this before that. And just, I think, not rushing it and making sure it has everything that Mr. Truck.
Yes, there may be an opportunity to include the lighting at the same time if we were to defer it. We also have 2 roof projects in the capital line, which, as you know, we're looking at the thermal scanning and looking at restoration versus replacement, so that may free up some more of that capital money. So being that the timeline would be impacted, the tennis courts could not be done this summer, we think there might be some advantages to waiting.
So I just think that what you're presenting today should be given to the board tomorrow, and you should present.
I actually think I would like to give it to the board today. After this meeting, I'd appreciate it if we could submit to the board the information regarding the lease back that breaks out everything for them just to have in advance. This very clear and concise presentation, if we could just have
Also with the
emailed.
little memo that says
Right,
that it would now be 3.2, because I think that's a very.
Regarding the tennis courts, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
because the discussion at the board meeting was if we could keep it at below 3 and add this, then it was a different,
But now it's a
all
different
very
animal.
clear that we wanted it to be below 3.
I mean, I think it's also a really important fact that the timing
timeline,
is
yes.
literally the
Right.
same,
Right.
no matter what we do.
Correct.
So we can say, and there's potential
Right,
advantages.
so that
Same
information
restaurant.
should be shared,
But I think it should be shared
And
today
we
with
are
the board
doing
so they
less
can have
information.
time to reflect and process and let it marinate a little. And
The
yes,
reason why we had the pictures too is because I didn't want people thinking it's a gaping crack.
Yes.
Falling in or tripping and, so yes, we wanted to show you that it really is okay and
So
And we are going to look to do these better
So that's my
repairs,
next
which
question.
then also allows this fall and next spring season to have,
yes,
the courts in a better condition than they are.
of these repairs, are you leaning towards more than part? I mean, this has to be budgeted into our current budget, right? So that we're looking at, is there one that you're leaning towards?
We'd like to go with the right way crack repair, that's at 35,000. Again, while that, is a significant expenditure for 2 seasons of tennis, we feel it puts us in a much better place. And we feel that we might be able to get that savings back by including the lighting when we do it and doing the project.
And budgetarily, is that already included in our? Yes.
We're gonna squeeze it out.
Maybe a
Yeah.
stronger yes on that, okay, so, okay. All right, other questions?
I have one tennis court question while we're looking at the pictures. So we have hard courts. While we're looking at this, and I'm assuming that somebody has already thought about this, but is there, I guess, what are the reasons that we have these kind of courts as opposed to other kinds of courts? Is it maintenance? Is it what's required by, what the divisions we play in? It should be replaced with the same thing, I guess, is what I'm asking. And I'm assuming you and Nick Sherweiss have already talked about
Yes,
this, but
yeah,
can you share with us?
So we've spoken a lot. The only other types of court would be a post-tensioning court, which is a lot more expensive, and you would find them more in areas of hydrostatic pressure, seaside communities. We don't have that issue here. So you would have asphalt typically. I think that's what most Section 8 teams have. A very few amount of districts have gone to turf. Definitely hasn't caught on, and Mr. Sharp has expressed concern about being one of those districts and being at a disadvantage, having a dissimilar playing surface than the rest of the teams and going away matches and home matches. So again, those teams that have that typically go back to they have those heaving cracks, and that's why we would go with an overlayment system as opposed to trying to keep up with the zombie repairs. We don't have that. We don't have any hydrostatic pressure here, so these are the best courts, the best value. What's industry standard.
Okay. I mean, it makes perfect sense to me that we would want a different surface than what the teams are going to be playing on most of the time. And obviously also, I mean, you don't have to get into a portion of the turf has its own issues as well, yeah.
So can I, for this committee, can I wrap up and say, am I safe to assume that amongst the three of us, we are in agreement with the recommendation that, we should not move forward and put it into this year's budget? That's what we're gonna recommend to the board. We do want this information shared, that we can have this as part of the discussion if needed, but is that the same?
I mean, I think we have a very clear recommendation from the administration that.
I just wanna make sure we're
makes sense,
where
and
we
there
are.
doesn't seem to be any reason, to disagree with it.
Great, I just wanna make sure we're all.
It seems like it makes financial sense. It has no impact on the timeline of what the teams will get to play on.
I agree with you.
So,
Can I also go back, I'm gonna take us back one more second to the lease agreement. Do we, as a committee, have a recommendation on where we fall, from the lease agreement standpoint, or do we need more information and wanna discuss it with the board and not make a recommendation?
I think it's, in my opinion, I think that the lease agreement is a no-brainer, and I think that if we were to say, as a committee, we don't want to see it, or as a board, we've just changed our entire budget. I mean, it's clear that if we don't do the lease agreement, our budgetary numbers change. So,
Again, I just wanna get a sense, we had a very lengthy discussion here, I wanna be firm for tomorrow night, and also if we need to have, we're going to have Brian come and just
I mean,
have.
if you want to do
a
a
little more-
presentation tomorrow night of what happens when you take the lease agreement out. I mean, if you do, I mean, it sounds like the board may have those kind of questions. I don't.
Well, again,
I would have
so
to
you,
cut it $1 million because we have to.
I think you need to.
I think you
say
need
that.
to say that then, I think that needs to be
Clear,
very
very
clear.
clear education.
I think that the questions, I mean, I would anticipate that the rest of the board is going to want to understand the details of this.
Yes.
But I think that the questions are not going to be so much for the financial part of it, but the underlying philosophical decision of devices as well. Because living, like, with the reality we're in, this is a no-brainer, right? You figured out the most cost-effective way for us to make sure the students have the right devices in their hand. I would anticipate tomorrow night, there's gonna be some questions about whether or not we really do need the one-to-one.
Oh my God,
Seriously.
I think
Oh, you're gonna have some questions
Okay,
about
so
it.
then, so that's fine, so we can have the philosophical, but I guess if we're
It's
continuing,
very clear to me that this
If
is
it's-
the financially
If
advantageous
right.
way to do it, and it makes sense, and this is the landscape.
so,
Right.
so staying with and supporting the one-to-one initiative, it is fair to say that this committee recommends this lease agreement proposition that is being put forward.
I mean, absolutely, always make,
Yeah, I agree,
the move
but-
that we've been making is like more certainty, more planning ahead.
Yes.
These cycles really help us budget, they help us always be prepared instead of behind the eight ball
Yes,
and having to pay more for things, makes
Great.
complete sense.
super. All right.
Other districts.
Anything else?
AI, we're gonna take away.
Anyone else have anything else question-wise at the table that we need to add? And I'm gonna open it up, and we're not talking about hydration stations today. We're going, because we're already past our time. Also, I would like to open up to the other board members if they have any budgetary questions about what we discussed today that haven't already been asked. Ms. Brooks?
Thank you. So the tennis courts, I just want to make sure I understand. If we put this in the budget for next year, the courts will be ready to play in August 24?
Yes.
So the same as if we put in the budget this year, the courts will still be ready August 24?
Yes.
My next question, do we know how old these courts are and why they are where they are?
I don't know, I can definitely research that and find it out for you, but tennis courts are gonna crack, all courts are cracking, it is a maintenance issue. Again, they are a tiered system, so there might be some impact from that drainage, which is something we're gonna look to alleviate. But tennis courts are something that has to be maintained and eventually resurfaced.
No, I understand, I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity to relocate them to someplace else, and I don't know how that would impact the cost. If there's some other place on the Schreiber, Weber area.
We looked at that because, again, one of Mr. Sharpweiser's initial goals was to add courts, to make more 7 or 8 courts. We did not find any feasible locations on the main campus. He has made a conscious effort to get all sports back on the main campus and reduce that transportation cost. So if you were to, find an area that could accommodate 8 courts and build them, you would offset any savings by now having to add the cost of transportation.
But what about just the 5 courts? Did he look at, is there another place with 5 courts?
Not on the main campus that, again, did cause other issues.
Yeah, okay. Do you know how much we've had to pay in repair over the years?
I don't.
I'm just wondering what the incremental cost has been to the district and how we actually got to the cost of new courts by incrementally patching and repairing over the years. I guess it's water under over the bridge, under the dam, whatever, but, okay. And are we certain that regardless of when we do this construction, it will not impact the playing time or the season? I don't know.
We would schedule it for that reason, so we would look to do it June and July. We would try not to do it July and August, because if we were to run late, if we were to have weather concerns, it could push into the fall season. That's one of the advantages of waiting, is we can be first in line. We can issue that letter of intent as early as June of this year and hold that contractor to that.
Thank you.
And anyone in the community have any questions regarding today's discussion? Ms. Alvarez?
Thank you. I do have 2 questions. I'll try to be quick with questions. First comment would be, I really hope I appreciate the board, this committee specific, relooking at the tennis courts. And I hope that tomorrow, because it has been 2 subcommittees that Superintendent Hines has recommended that this be pushed off. So I really hope that this is actually heard tomorrow with the full board's agreement. So one of my questions did come up last week with the budget cuts. I know it was listed in one of the slides with the EAs and TAs and the confusion of the grouping it with the CSE's projection. So at the moment, last week and still today, it still is confusing, including, I am on SEPTA, I'm on Parents Council, I help with our PTA, and even discussions with those members, that is still confusion of the tie-in between those two. Are the 20 cuts group, or 20 EATAs specific to special education needs or separate from the special education needs? And if that is two separate items, more clarity on what the 20 EATA cuts are, because that didn't feel answered last week, or fully addressed as far as what those 20 EATAs building level wise, which buildings, and what that actually looks like. Separately with that, I understand Dr. Allen's, and she's not here today, kind of projecting next year's needs, and I understand that November they already project placements, and I have 2 children with special needs, and that is like a November through annuals that they kind of project resources. But the trend is that more children are needing resources. So also just clarity on what that means. So I just feel like there wasn't as much clarity last week and even today's budget meeting for that. That would be one separate question that I don't need an answer today, but I put it out there.
Is there a way we could, I think this is a full board conversation, and I think tomorrow, in light of our more in-depth, we were handling some very specific things here. Can we, Dr. Hines, make sure that we have a greater understanding and clarity on what that really means in the personnel cuts?
So to build on that, I think and Ms. Aldridge, you're 100% correct on that. I think if we can get a breakdown, I think, of how many COVID extra positions are being eliminated versus how many are being eliminated because the needs are no longer there for the IEPs.
Well, I don't even think, I think that I would think that there would be a rationalization, COVID or otherwise. Listen, right? Behavioral, we discussed this also at the board meeting. Behavioral issues are only on the increase, whether you have an IEP or not. Behavioral issues are on the increase, and the EAs and the TAs are the professionals that are helping to subdue some of those issues. So if there is a rationalization for reduction in them, just to make it very clear what that is. Maybe we have way too many regardless, and our behavioral issues are all taken care of. Maybe our CSE issues are taken care of, or our IEPs, or we didn't need them because we overdid it at COVID.
And
But
just to add though, Dr. Allen did say at the meeting, I think that in response to that is that the behavioral consultants
are also, bring the behavioral.
But I think it'd be
consultant.
important to have a breakdown of exactly the positions that we're talking about.
Thank you, yes, so that's great.
I just want to be clear, behavioral issues doesn't mean every child needs a,
I-
or an EA. No, I'm
I'm
just
not-
saying,
yes,
I just want to be clear. But as far as the breakdown, we can certainly provide.
Behavioral issues, I also think happen on the playground, which is when we also have EAs and TAs again, right? That's where my experience coming, that's super, yes.
The second question,
yes.
sorry. And just to clarify, that's where it's, again, speaking of SEPTA, that it was unclear that those two continuously are getting tied in both conversations. That 20 TAs, EAs get very closely tied with what special education needs are. So just the separating the two, if that is separated, because even just now, again, what's confusing of, we're talking about the same.
We don't even
EAs.
know, right?
So for that. The clarity for the Manor Haven full-time position. So last week when that position was discussed at the Board of Ed meeting, Adam Smith asked Dr. Shields if the forecast was because of the kindergarten numbers upcoming, and if that position was getting added. However, the concerns this year from the Manor Haven PTA has been, and I'm assuming Principal Diaz has been, because of the current kindergarten children being over the recommended class ratio the board has established. But it was confusing because Dr. Shields answered the question in the same time that Adam Smith asked about incoming kindergarten. Is there a concern about the class ratio for incoming kindergarten students for Manor Haven School?
Yeah, let me be really clear on that. So you're right, the question was around the same time on the board meeting, so I can see how some people might put it together. The FTE increase of one elementary line is to address the current kindergarten at Manor Haven that's going into first grade. It's not to address any concerns about the size of the incoming kindergarten class for this September.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I had two questions. First, on the lease thing, I just want to comment that this is fantastic. I think it's great. If anyone has read The Mythical Lawnmower, they know that every 18 months, technology gets halved in price and twice in speed. So having something like that. For the iPads, Apple actually stops supporting iPads every 5 years. So 5 years from now, that iPad purchased now is no longer going to be supported by Apple anymore. That's for phones, that's for their computers, that's for everything. So 3 years is a great timeline because you still have 2 years left on the life cycle of that iPad when it gets purchased. And then my only question is, do we know the lifespan of the 2 tennis court options? So when you're doing the repair, like what the estimated lifespan might be, and then with the full court redo, what the lifespan of the new courts might be?
A lot of variables. If you do a crack repair, it's annual. You know that each year you would do that annual crack repair. You typically do that in the summer prior to the fall season. You'll have some expansion contraction based on freezing. Typically, we look for 20 years out of tennis courts. Again, there's a lot of variables that play into that. Are you doing the maintenance? Are you doing crack repairs? And are you doing the right way system to stop those cracks from expanding? Is there hydrostatic pressure? Is there drainage issues that can all compound and impact the 20 years would be the goal.
So, sorry, just to follow up. So if it's next year, I know we're pushing out for next year, but this is a question for next year. But are those going to be audited? Like, are we going to audit the survey of the land to make sure that when we put in the new courts, that any like structural issues that might have existed 20 years ago or new because of climate change are going to be addressed before the new courts are put in?
Absolutely. The athletic director, the tennis coaches, myself, my team, we're out there and we're looking at the condition of all of the facilities, but particularly our playing services are audited annually. Our insurance inspection includes all of our playing services done annually.
And then my last thing for the lights is, are we considering solar lights? For the tennis?
Remember, we also have our EPC
Right.
that will potentially look into that, hopefully.
Perfect.
But we're waiting for that assessment to come back as well.
Right, okay, great.
I saw, yes.
Not a question, more of a comment, just to make very clear to Mrs. Sinter's questions around the EAT reductions. One thing that we've been hearing constantly through Parents Council for the last really 2 years is the value and the service that EAs and TAs provide for the smooth operation of school at recess, at arrival, at dismissal, at lunchtime, and the behavioral issues that parents at least have been reporting are occurring at those times, not necessarily in classrooms. So, just wanted to make clear that that's a big concern in the community, and the behaviorist, while wonderful, is a targeted intervention and doesn't
For children, IEPs.
for children, specifically for children for IEPs, and isn't providing that service of oversight and kind of crowd management that the EAs and TAs are. So I think that's the concern among the broader community that we would like to hear addressed at the meeting tomorrow night. So what are the anticipated impacts? And if these EAs and TAs are underutilized, the community certainly hasn't been feeling that. So we'd like to understand the case and the rationale of
I think that's, I'm trying to do that. Okay. Super. Anyone else?
Yeah, just adding on to that, going back from at all like levels, like since I was at SUSE and the HSA president, questions have come up. Why can't some kids do indoor recess and some kids do outdoor recess even if it's a little cold? Oh, because we don't have enough supervision, we don't have enough TAs to supervise the kids. At Weber, why do the doors open at 7:55? Like, why can't everyone go into the building like they did pre-COVID? Because we don't have enough supervision. So, yes, I think it's an important question. I've been hearing that for years when I've been questioning certain policies that there's not enough supervision, and then to hear that there's going to be, up to 20 cuts of these, paraprofessionals that are pretty integral in the operation of the school, I think it's, I just want to reiterate that that's, definitely a concern. And probably the biggest thing that stuck out from this presentation and some of the cuts.
Can I just pick up on a piece of that? Because I think it would be interesting to have the answers to both pieces, right? Because elementary and Weber are a little different. And right, I think Weber hasn't gone back to allowing them in the hallways, but they didn't have more EAs and TAs before COVID. And so we don't have the same, I'm assuming pre-COVID, that age range of students, we thought needed a certain amount of supervision. During COVID, we thought they needed more supervision so they didn't do things that spread COVID.
Right, and it's spacing apart, right?
Right, but if we are no longer at the point where we think that's a concern, can that policy simply go back? Right?
Hopefully have an understanding of our EAT situation just in general as a first look, right? We're all speaking in very unknown terms all around and having a really first look at this is what an EAT does to differentiate.
What's the dollars that we're talking about?
It's 1.3
That is them taking them.
yes.
Just one last thing.
Okay,
I'm sorry, it'll be quick. I just asked that the Board of Ed consider that if these are 20 redundant positions, that those 20 positions be relooked at for the concerns of all of the schools. So if those current 20 positions were added because of COVID and are certain positions that are no longer needed, are not filling a role, I think the community has voiced there are roles for them in other areas potentially. So if one is
I
getting moved,
heard the answer that I asked her. I asked her, what's the cost? And she said it's 1.2 million. So what
Three,
they're asking,
1.3 million.
1.3 million. So I think that's why I asked, what does it cost? So we would have to, as a Board of Education, discuss adding 1.3 million back into the budget and either going above the tax cap at this point or eliminating something else that comes up to 1.3. So I think that's.
You're right, but I think
That's your point,
both,
Sandra,
yes.
but that's what the number is.
I mean, I really think that to me, the important piece of information is what are the COVID positions, what are the IEP positions, and my sense is this is a pretty solid recommendation from the administration, and you feel very comfortable with it, but so maybe the board and the community getting a little more detail on it.
I think that would be much helpful, very helpful. Ms. Brooks?
I'm sorry, I forgot to ask about the passenger buses. Are those diesel or electric?
Those are diesel.
Okay, and that's because they're less expensive than electric, or the electric is not available? Or both?
We don't have the infrastructure yet to actually have electric buses.
Okay, so in 5 minutes, I'll be out of everything, and I've already kept them 25 minutes late. But again, this is very important work, and I think we've got some great work done. I appreciate everyone attending. I thank everyone for all your questions and for your presentations are here. Thank you guys. And
See you all tomorrow night. If you
Yes.
if you all come to the meeting tomorrow night.
Yes.
I want to stop the recording.
Oh, Jessica, stop it. Yeah.